Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to our channel. SAMexpert TV is again with you with our famous free of charge Microsoft licensing training modules, which we do almost every month. Sometimes we have to take a break, but you can be pretty sure that every month, roughly, there'll be something new on our channel here where we'll just teach you stuff around Microsoft licensing. And this is something new for us, not new for the world, but we're pretty late in the game. We start introducing cloud-related modules. Again, licensing in the cloud economics, but cloud-related, not purely Microsoft on-premise licensing. And today, you don't see Daryl here, as you probably used to, but we have Stefan Denk, who's our chief cloud economist, and Stefan will be talking, if not probably more than half of the time today. So we are co-hosting today's training, and the reason why Stefan is here, well, firstly, SAMexpert is expanding, and secondly, he is responsible for the cloud, and therefore today's subject is Azure cost management or Azure cost management, and that's why we're here. Like this today. So, and by the way, you've probably seen Stefan already in a couple of videos on our channel, and one of the live shows, and we had a video recorded when we had a Teams call when we were discussing Azure cost management, and there's a video on the channel which is made out of that call, which is pretty good, by the way. So, Stefan, say hello.
Hello, audience. It's a pleasure to be back. Thank you very much for the intro, Alex, and I'm going to hold you accountable to the 50% of content.
Yeah, of course. So let's do quickly some housekeeping because people will start joining more. We are approaching exactly 3 o'clock London time. This is our usual typical time when we start. And here we are. So very brief introduction, again, whilst people are joining. Today, this is us, your hosts. I'm the CEO of SAMexpert, and Stefan is Chief Cloud Economist. So without further ado, we have experience in the industry, and we know what we're talking about. And by the way, SAMexpert is not a training company, although we have a training website. And let me show you the QR code, which you can point your phone at and go to our Academy website, where we started publishing commercial trainings, and this training as well, the free one, neatly organized in a free of charge training. So by all means, visit our academy, please, and maybe you'll find something interesting for you there. But we are a consulting company. We consult. Whatever we talk about here is our own experience. It's what we do. And what we do is various things around Microsoft Cloud and licensing, so strategic cost planning. For some reason, my slides are not switching. Cloud migration planning, cloud economics, FinOps, agreement negotiations. So all around Microsoft relationship, as we call it, relationship with Microsoft, your vendor management, but a bit wider than just purely vendor management. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on our own website, SAMexpert.com. We encourage you to also come and just watch our videos, which again, these are not webinars. We actually deliver value. It's not like, us talking about us, how great we are, or throwing at you some high-level, obscure stuff. No, we just share. We have an urge to share, and we share, and we have a blog on our website. I'm not sure if that particular link /blog works, but you can try. I think it does. It does. I'm joking. There are articles. We publish about 2 or 3 articles a week, so pretty good cadence. And we have videos. The cadence of videos maybe 1 or 2, one video in a week or 2 weeks, including our live events, which we try to have every Wednesday, but sometimes live kicks in and other things kick in, and we have to reschedule. Otherwise, we will try to get back to that weekly cadence every Wednesday on our channel. Again, free information sharing. And by the way, say hello where you're from. Well, we already have people joining. So Just a second. Let me see. I switched off the QR code, and let's move on. And by the way, as I mentioned, the Academy, this is our new training hub. So I already mentioned it. Please just type it in your browser, SAMexpert.academy. That's the domain name, and check it out. For all the previous training materials, and by the way, our own certification program. We have a certification program where we certify Microsoft License Management. Nobody else in the entire world does it. There's a free licensing certification that Get Licensing Ready. There are some paid trainings by ITAM Review, Directions of Microsoft, Licensing School, but there's nothing like what we do. So yeah, you can go, you can come and get certified, and sometimes it's free. So watch this space. If you're watching the recording of these slides, please check the comments and the in the play bar. Now we're live, but when it will be recorded, in the play bar, check the chapters. They're called chapters, so you can quickly walk around. This is going to be a pretty long training. I think 60 to 90 minutes. Right, and use in the description for useful links, as this slide helpfully says. We get this question quite often, so will we publish these slides? We don't publish them kind of for public domain, but if you want to download them, if you subscribe to the Academy mailing list, we're going to just start distributing them very soon. So we haven't started yet. By the way, if you subscribe now, you'll catch up with all the previous training slides. Now, this is the 5th episode of the current series of our training. This is the second season, 5th episode of the second season of our training series. We have a lot. We already have about 12, I think, or 13 episodes. So what you're going to learn today is Introduction to Azure Economics. We'll talk about services and metrics, high level and maybe sometimes in depth, depending on whether you are active. I mean, if you're here, if you want to ask your question, make this interactive. Ask your questions. So yeah, I will start with disclaimer and copyright. Basically, this is all copyright SAMexpert. So it's our IP. This is our experience. This is our what's the word I'm looking for? Experience. We're talking about our own bruises and battle scars. It's not just theoretical. So we deal with it on a daily basis. Sometimes there may be a bit of theory, and in that case, I'll caveat it. And that's what I just said. This training is about practical implementation. The other important caveat is when we mention, today it's not going to be mentioned a lot because we'll be talking about costs, but we can mention occasionally stuff like Azure Hybrid Benefit or bring your own license. Whichever advice we give, we're confident in its quality, but we always encourage everybody to go to this Microsoft Product Terms website and check it after us. Especially, for example, if you watch our first season of the training, 2021, there are some things that Microsoft changed in 2022. So they don't work like that anymore. And therefore, you may probably have heard about that something has changed. And we're talking, for example, if we tell you that there is no license mobility for Windows Server, but there is now. So always check whatever you hear, whatever you learn, read online against the current Microsoft product terms. It's important. It's very, very important. Learn to use them. Hello, Carl. Carl is as usual with us, and pleased to have you here today. Yeah, well, Azure is becoming everyone's core business objective, I think. Cloud in general, there's a lot of right now. I think we've gone through the early adopters phase and a bit of what was that, like a downfall? Stefan, what's it called? Like the second phase when everything actually the first excitement is fading, and now we're getting into the practical phase of adoption of a new thing, and this is when the actual professionals come in and actually start managing it.
Yes. Yeah, it was the initial adoption where, I mean, a lot of great new businesses were created and founded, which were only possible because the cloud with its new methods came around. And I think now we are in full swing where traditional businesses are really going into the cloud major key. So I hear about data center closures. I hear about a at least 50-50 strategy where some data center capacity remains, but it's more and more becoming not a hybrid cloud, but a public cloud first, and even more and more a public cloud only strategy over the next few years. So adoption is big, and yeah, so we are seeing the cloud spend going up year by year. For this year, it is forecasted to step up from 300 billion last year to 400 billion this year. Not just Microsoft Azure, but investments in all the public clouds. So yeah, it's definitely the future's market, and it has come to stay. But only strategy over the next year.
Sorry, I'm just checking whether we're live. We are live, so it's all fine.
Good. I love my echo.
Nice. So actually, let's move on. So Microsoft Azure, and some of these slides you may have seen in our previous training session, and but we're gonna present them in a bit of from a bit of a different perspective. So Azure is as a service, everything as a service, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, desktop as a service, whatever else as a service. It's a cloud. It's cloud. Data as a service.
No, headache as a service. I think we need to include.
That's
and it's
a good
included
job.
for free. That's the only thing that actually comes for free in Microsoft Azure.
Stefan, I need to invite you more often. So you pay for what you provision, for what you use, and software license cost is included, and how to avoid that and reduce that cost. There are a few options, and because today we're talking about Azure cost management, we cannot avoid the subject of bring your own license. So you may opt for, and Stefan, I'll give you back the mic in a few seconds when you can say your words about it, but let me just do an intro. You can either pay as you go for the licenses included with the services, usually with Windows Server or SQL Server. These are the most kind of used services. I'm not even sure Microsoft sells any more included services. I may be wrong, but there's an option to reduce the costs. If, for example, if your current licenses, you must compare it. Your current licenses are cheaper on a subscription model or a software assurance model, but sorry, Carl, your comment just I'll get back to that. So then you can use Azure Hybrid Benefit, which we discussed in the previous training session. If you want us to kind of go back to that today again, if you have any questions about Azure Hybrid Benefit, please ask them in the chat. We'll take them and respond to them. So that's the first cost reduction option. The other one is some of the eligible products that have license mobility through software assurance. Again, you must pay for software assurance. You may take them to and deploy them in virtual machines. There may be, if you partner with a service provider, hosting provider, sometimes they may also help you by providing you services, not just licenses, so they're not allowed to give you just licenses, but providing you services with licenses included, the licenses that, for example, Azure does not provide. And some solutions require bring your own license. So even today, if you deploy a virtual desktop solution using Windows Server platform on Azure, I'm not talking about Windows 365, on the Windows Server platform, you deploy an application and you give your users access to the remote desktop. You must have remote desktop cards or SALs. And in this case, you can't buy them from Microsoft Azure. You have to bring them from somewhere else, either with your corporate licensing or volume licensing, or through service provider with SALs. So some solutions require bring your own license, so you can't avoid that. But in regards to cost management, you have Azure Hybrid Benefit, and you have license mobility. Stefan, would you like to say? I mean, I know it's your favorite subject, comparing costs. So I'll give you back the mic.
Okay, thank you, Sasha. So My record so far has been when comparing what you can pay for a 8-core virtual machine inside of Azure, where you are getting the license included feature for Windows Server, with a tier D public entity price list. It was 22.8, but not percent cheaper, but times cheaper to use the yearly Microsoft Server standard license. And now one good thing, which we probably cover a little later, or you can ask about in the questions, is you tend to have a lot of data center licenses when you are coming from an existing enterprise agreement. And there it's not just like 22.8 times less expensive, but it's actually infinitely less expensive, because data center licenses you can even dual use in Azure. So this means if you have a large pool of these licenses on your on-prem environment, ticking the license included feature inside of Azure is actually paying money where you wouldn't even have to. So by all means, it's an important concept, Azure hybrid benefit or hybrid use benefit, to dig into deeper if your company already has an existing enterprise deployment with an existing enterprise agreement.
It's actually mind-boggling how often we see that a company has data center licenses with software assurance or through an enterprise agreement. So they may take them and dual use them at the same time, simultaneously in Azure, but they're not. And thus they're paying for something they shouldn't be paying for. So if you are a company like this, just now you know that you can use those licenses and use them in Azure. It's not like a movement of licenses. It's simultaneous use of Windows Server data center licenses. Nothing else. Everything else must be transferred to Azure, but Windows Server data center licenses may be used here and there. So there we go.
One more remark I would like to make, Sasha, and this is Azure is offering you two different ways of licensing the Microsoft Server product suite. There is the regular one, which you are paying for in your enterprise subscription, so it's for productive usage. But Microsoft is also offering a dev test subscription, which if all your users are licensed under a Visual Studio license, actually allows you to consume Windows Server, SQL Server, BizTalk Server, all these products free of charge. You're only paying the base rate for the virtual machine itself, like if you were running a CentOS or Ubuntu Linux system on that. Now, that's a tricky thing, which so far I have hardly seen, but it can happen. If you are selecting, I already have a license on a dev test virtual machine running SQL Server, you don't have to pay for that license, but if it is getting reported into your true-up, it may be missed that this is actually a free license, and you end up buying a SQL Server Enterprise, which would be given to you free of charge. So it's kind of the outlier case, but yeah, there's a bit of magic to that, and very happy to help you make sense of your enterprise agreement licensing.
Going a bit on a tangent, Carl responded to your previous comments. No offense, cloud spend is not a good measure for growth. 11% prices up from 1st April for Azure pay-as-you-go, but I see your point, Stefan.
Yeah. These poor cloud providers somehow have to make a living too, don't they?
Yeah,
but we are here to help you reel back a bit of these 11% again, because so far any company's cloud spend I have looked at, I was at least able to knock off 11 to 15% from their cloud spend.
I've seen an interesting analysis by JP Morgan, and they are saying that they are not convinced that Azure is going to grow this year as well as they used to. So they're kind of on the fence. The prediction for the Microsoft shares is positive a little bit. So we may see in the end of this year, we may see price per share roughly what it was before the crash. But there are some doubts, and this is how they're probably trying to recover the lost revenue. So most of the time, when you take something from Azure, you pay consumption rates for what you use. Storage is measured in gigabytes. We'll get to that. We have a specific slide, but anyway. You can have APIs that could be built per API calls. Virtual machines are, Stefan, correct me if I'm wrong, they're per minute, aren't they?
Yes, the virtual machines are per minute. They will be showing in your billing by the hour, but you actually pay per minute. A
Yeah,
few
and
services you even pay per second, but honestly, for most real life cases, if you pay per minute or per second, doesn't make a huge difference.
and license is paid per minute, isn't it, as well? The included license. That's why comparison
Yes,
must be actually done in a from
yes,
all angles. I mean, Azure Hybrid Benefit, if you only use a virtual machine once in a week for an hour, then you don't need Azure Hybrid Benefit. It's going to be more expensive, obviously, than
that is
pay-as-you-go.
correct. Yes, absolutely.
And there are also per-user licenses and their licenses. So the cost management in that area with per-user licenses is basically just you looking after what licenses you assign, and unassigning licenses when they're not needed. So that's a typical nitty-gritty, almost software asset management type of service. We just need to look after your licenses and make sure they're always up to date. Yes, it's part of FinOps now. But it's something that will be the traditional SAM managers would be familiar with. It's a license management. And there's also marketplace. And marketplace varies. It depends on the vendor. Obviously, marketplace applications run on top of Azure services. And we're going to come back to that topic a couple of times throughout this presentation, throughout this training. But just for you to know that obviously there are third-party solutions, but they also use Azure services.
Let
And
me say one
understanding
thing
of
about
that,
the marketplace, please, Sasha, because I think this is pretty
yeah,
interesting for our enterprise agreement customers. The consumption that you have from the marketplace allows you to draw down any commitments that you may have against Azure. So if you have a Mac in place or a commitment to consume, any services coming out of the Azure marketplace draw down from your initial commitment into Microsoft. And you can even get, for example, consulting charges, managed services charges through the marketplace now. So it is more than only getting a appliance from a vendor who packs some license into the bill of the virtual machine. Way bigger than that nowadays.
nice.
Back to you.
Yeah, I wanted to say, everybody, thank you for being with us now. I mean, we're not stopping, we're continuing. If you like what's going on up to this moment, please click like on the video. We'd appreciate that. That helps us grow, helps us reach out new audience. And if you have any friends that would benefit from coming here live now and asking the questions, please share the link with them now on your social media. Send it by WhatsApp. We need more people today. Okay, so yeah, by the way, this slide was showing service metrics. That's what I told you about, how different things are measured and built. And what's important here is you kind of need to grasp this, how this works, to then be able to manage your Azure costs. Because the idea behind subscription services like this, not just cloud, is if you're using it, you're paying for it. But if it's activated and running, but you're not using it, you're still paying for it. You call the taxi, and you're not using the taxi, but it's there, near your front door, on your driveway, and the clock is ticking. So obviously, when we're talking about storage, the cost management is just managing how much you store and in what regions, and maybe there are other tweaks which Stefan. Feel free to chip in when I stop talking. If you pay for virtual machines per hour, then basically, how do you reduce the costs? Shut them down. If you don't need specific machines and services during the weekend and during, for example, Easter holidays, have a script. There are lots of already automated script solutions tools that allow you to shut down specific virtual machines or even entire clusters of virtual machines when you don't need them. That is a good thing. Stuff like artificial intelligence probably will be extremely difficult to manage because when you use it, you usually need it. And if it's measured per transaction, you just pay per transaction. So not much cost management may be done there. But with storage and virtual machines, database services, obviously, optimization of every single nitty-gritty detail that is connected to the metric. This is how you manage the costs. Stefan, would you like to add anything to this?
Yes, happy to. So You can basically do two things with these services. It is either to, as Sasha said, shut them down. For example, development test workloads. When you are creating a system copy of an SAP system to try out something new, which you only need 2 days in a week because this is the time your developers work on, there's not really a need to let it run 24/7 and then pay the pay-as-you-go rate for that. So what you can instead do is power these down, and Azure has nowadays introduced this into the portal as a native experience that when you're creating a virtual machine, you can directly during creation say when this VM should shut down itself. This is then basically implementing this automation, which Sasha was talking about, and it's inbuilt in the Azure portal. You do not need any third-party service for it. You do not need to pay anybody else. It is simply made available for you, because also Microsoft has understood that you want to power down virtual machines, you want to have the possibility to save, and they basically made it available. Next to other savings levers, which we are going to discuss a little later in this training.
Interestingly, Microsoft has started introducing their own cost management tools in Azure, which we'll probably have an additional video training about where we'll just walk you through the tool. Unless, Stefan, we have time in the end of this training where you can demonstrate them.
Yes.
Or during the training, whether that's appropriate. So this is not about the cost management. So this slide is about how you manage your the cash flow. So you need to be aware that various consumption services or user licenses or marketplace services, they are paid differently. Some of them do offer prepayments and commitments, some of them don't. Some of them have monthly payments monthly in arrears, so for your actual usage in the end of the month. This is how it translates to human language. Some of them don't. Some of them require monthly upfront payments, like user licenses. You have to pay for them upfront, otherwise you won't be granted those licenses. However, for example, for Azure user licenses, there's no monthly option through volume licensing, so you have to pay for it. You have to pay for it upfront entirely. Marketplace is a bit of a mixed bag, because what just Stefan just said, that Microsoft Azure commitment, what's it called? The MAC agreement. It does account for your usage of marketplace licenses. The only note that, by the way, Stefan gave me when we were reviewing and putting together these slides is, and please correct me if I'm wrong in understanding, is that the rebates, the discounts do not apply to the marketplace services, third-party services, but they do apply to the services underpinning that third-party application, so VM storage and whatnot.
Exactly, so that's the idea. So if you take a simple example, the pay-as-you-go cost of a given VM would be $100, and the license surcharge would be another $100 for you. But you enjoy a 10% rebate. The license will remain at $100 because this is a third-party cost which Microsoft just bills you for and then forwards to the third party. But the virtual machine would receive this 10% rebate. So you would be paying in the end $190 instead of $200.
Nice. Okay. So I did understand you correctly. Right. Moving on. So how can you buy Azure? You can buy it through via CSP, Cloud Solution Partner of Microsoft Cloud Solution Partner. Unless you have an enterprise agreement, because normally if you have an enterprise agreement, you would be approached by the enterprise agreement team. By the way, these days, they also can approach you directly and say, so it's almost the same team, same people, but it'll be a different kind of agreement. So not necessarily anything attached to your enterprise agreement. That is so-called enterprise motion, which I'll mention in a couple of slides from now. So larger companies are already in the last 2 years being approached by Microsoft to basically Microsoft offering them to procure Azure directly in large volumes with the management of Microsoft itself. And obviously, this is an option that is the least preferred. if you have an enterprise agreement, you can still buy services, just order them directly from Azure.com without going through enterprise agreement, if you wish so. But Stefan, what was that caveat that you told me about the tenant name?
Yeah, that was a really bad surprise that I myself hit recently. I wanted to set up a tenant. I had researched available tenant names. I had researched available domain names, registered everything. And then I went to the Azure portal and clicked on the sign up for a new subscription. It asked me for my email address. So I gave stefan.denk@mydomainname.com. And I wanted to specify the domain or the tenant as mydomain.onmicrosoft.com. This is how I intended it. I was greeted to the tenant Stefan Denk mycompany.onmicrosoft.com without any way of changing that. And now the real kicker is that if you are then later on deciding to move into SharePoint Online or other things, Stefan Denk my company will be the root URL of your SharePoint. So this is something which your CEO can be very unhappy about, especially if the company already exists. And if all of a sudden your name makes it into the SharePoint site, which everybody sees. So the right way to procure, which allows you to select a tenant name, is to either go through the CSP. The CSP partner, upon creation of your Azure environment, will ask you what the tenant name is supposed to be, and you can specify it as your company.onmicrosoft.com. Or you are going through the Microsoft 365 business application subscription, and it can just be a trial subscription, which you can immediately cancel afterwards. During the sign-up process, it will ask you which tenant name you would like to have, and this is then the one you get, if it's available. I should have known this first time around. Would have made life a lot easier. Now I have a different domain name.
Yeah, well, good luck with changing it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure
I
you'll figure it
tried
out.
20 hours, I gave up. I thought about a new domain name.
So we put together this slide last year, and again, I'm repeating this slide now. Why? Because Microsoft likes inventing new marketing names for various things, and some of those names are supposed to stay internally inside Microsoft. It's just for the internal people to speak the same language, but those names creep out to the public, and then procurement managers are getting bombarded with breadth motion, enterprise motion, self-service motion. So what are these? Take a screenshot of this slide, or subscribe to the SAMexpert Academy email and download the slides of this presentation. Basically, when you hear breadth motion, it means that you're probably being approached by somebody in the cloud solution provider ecosystem, and you're probably a company below 2,400 seats. If you enterprise agreement, you probably know what enterprise agreement is. If you don't, we have a specific training about an enterprise agreement we did 2 or 3 months ago, updated for all the current realities. So please go back and watch it. If you are an enterprise over 2,400 seats and you're approached directly by Microsoft salesperson, you may hear the term enterprise motion. This is what it is. It's just an internal Microsoft name for this entire way of selling you Azure services. And if you go to Azure.com, that's called self-service motion. Again, if you hear that term, this is what it means. And this is what they look like on a graph, basically, of sizes of companies. We're not going to stay a lot on for a long time on this slide because I've explained it all already. Now, Azure is a little bit different depending on how you procure it. Strictly speaking, in 2023 enterprise agreement, if you have been purchasing licenses through an enterprise agreement still provides almost on every level the best price protection, support option. However, there are no volume discounts per service. And we had this discussion with Stefan. Stefan asked me, yeah, but there's MAC, there are commitments and you get discounts. Yeah, but you do, but you get discount on the entire range of Azure services that you're committed to procure. On your monitoring, value almost. What I'm talking about is, for example, in CSP, there are programmatic discounts or graduated discounts on storage. So you buy more storage, the price of per gigabyte drops. I mean, how well it drops, it's a separate question, but it does. That feature still does not exist in the enterprise agreements. And in the enterprise agreement, regardless of whether it's committed or pay as you go, you pay a fixed price for storage. Otherwise, in my opinion, because I deal with agreements high level, I still think, and honestly, we don't sell licenses, so I don't care about whether somebody buys an enterprise agreement or CSP, but I still see that economically it's the best option, even for Azure, even with all those caveats. You want to say anything on that, Stefan, too?
No, the only thing that you need to ensure is that if you are consuming the Microsoft Azure environment through an enterprise agreement, and you may happen to have a Premier support contract, now unified support contract, which does not yet include your Azure subscriptions, that you then need to maybe close a separate support contract. I guess with unified support nowadays, this is not so much an issue, but in the olden times when it was Premier support, you could well be in a situation where your on-prem environment was covered by Premier support. And as soon as you wanted to open a ticket and reach to your Premier technical account manager for an Azure-related thing, they would say, hey, sorry, that's not in scope. And then you started buying your own service.
Okay, so support is different. You're correct. So enterprise agreement does not include support. This is why you will be offered Microsoft Unified support, because that's an additional agreement on top of your EA. And its price of Unified support is actually attached to your overall consumption of Azure and licenses. There are different percentage rates, but it's still attached. Your consumption grows, your licenses grow, the cost of unified support still grows, even if you are not consuming more services. Premier support was transparent. You paid for hours and tickets, you got your hours and tickets. Unified support is, and I wouldn't say it's like eat as much as you like. It's not. There are certain caveats. And the price is basically just like a normal, maintenance price in Oracle or something like it. CSP is different to that. CSP, to get authorized as a cloud solution partner, you must commit to Microsoft as a partner managing client licenses that you will provide them support, either yourself or through your indirect reseller. So Microsoft offloaded CSP support onto the channel. And when you buy Azure through CSP, support is included, but not by Microsoft, by the partner.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean,
this is
usually the partner then has a Premier unified support contract behind the scenes. So for tricky things which are related to the infrastructure, they have a good way of contacting Microsoft. And especially if you are working in a smaller company, a big CSP usually has good vendor relations with Microsoft. So in case something is wrong over a longer period of time, the chance to be heard, especially for smaller customers, and this is why CSP really starts with a single person company, is much higher if you are raising this to a competent CSP than if you're trying your own luck convincing Microsoft that they should do things specifically for you. In both cases, it's an uplift which you just need to keep in mind. CSPs will usually charge some percentage of an uplift in order to rake back the support fees we are paying behind the scenes to provide this service. On the Microsoft side, you also have to factor in an additional uplift to the pure Azure consumption you are buying, unless you want to wing it on your own with all the technical problems that may arise.
Stefan, I have the next slide. I actually wanted to skip it, but no, I'm going to bring this in. So I think the most important thing here is that although now Microsoft fully harmonized the billing, and the billing is always in your currency, on invoices. The price list that partners get, or you get directly from Microsoft, it's actually in American dollars.
That is correct. They will give
What's
the
what's
US
your experience?
prices.
Can we manipulate this to manage or reduce costs somehow,
No,
even by a small percentage?
no, you really cannot. I mean, your overall enterprise agreement, if you can switch to a different currency, you do have, or at least you had, some price advantages. But Azure has always been denominated in US dollars. And the only thing that Microsoft does is that every month they are fixing the exchange rate between US dollars and your invoice currency. And they basically derive this from Reuters or a service comparable to that. So it's transparent how they do it. But you are subject to currency fluctuations. If you are not procuring in US dollars, you basically pay every month a slightly different price for the same service as your currency goes up and down versus the dollar.
Another thing I want to ask you, Stefan, is obviously Azure P1 is no more, but nevertheless, there are differences between channels in the prices, even like this. Some things may be included in products, and some things, if you buy them online, whatever you have included with your product doesn't actually work. So do you still see differences like this?
Yeah, it basically is Microsoft is trying to make some of their services more appetizing. The premium P1, for example, is included in the M365 E3 license, so 3. The P2 would be included in the E5 license. And the idea is that these packages on the Microsoft 365 side provide, as they go to higher numbers, more and more security features. And they include then services which you can also buy standalone for this $6 or $9 extra per month for the services. And by the way, as far as I remember, it's $9 on top of the P1. So P2 should actually be in total 15, if I remember right, but I may be wrong. The idea there really is, if you're already going up for your Microsoft 365 renewals, a whole lot of this is included. But yeah, worst case, you can buy it double because Microsoft is not going to block you from buying P1 or P2 licenses you don't actually need.
Thank you. Going back to the subject of unified support and CSP support. So Carl is saying your CSP partner may be a second-tier indirect CSP. So having the first-level CSP as a partner, the ticket will be relayed to MSFT by the first-level CSP. Actually, it won't necessarily work like this. So it's a bit not related to Azure, but maybe it is. Is it cost management? Probably not. But let's talk about it. So partners are required. CSP partners are required to purchase. Actually, no. Wait a second. Are they required? So there are three levels. There are three levels of partner support from Microsoft. One is your MPN partner benefits, which you may use. I'm not sure if you may use them with CSP. I need to update that. I don't remember that from top of my mind. But they're usually not enough. They're tiny. So what partners normally are almost required to purchase are 2 support packages from Microsoft. There's a Microsoft Advanced support for partners and Microsoft Premium support for partners. Again, right now I don't remember which is which. There's basically just Google for Microsoft support packages for partners, and you'll get to the page with the comparison. And one of them only includes Azure and no escalation to Microsoft. There is no escalation to Microsoft. Well, they may escalate, but you may not connect your end clients. So the partner may escalate it to Microsoft through that program. It does not include software, but as we're talking about Azure, it's enough for Azure. If you want to also include support for products like Office, on-premise service or something like it, then in that case, you need to buy a larger support package. And in that case, the partner may even connect the end client directly to Microsoft if nothing else helps. So it's not like every ticket will be escalated to Microsoft, and they probably won't get a good experience. But it's a possibility. So it's possible. So it's a bit of a convoluted structure. But still, the good thing for the end client is that the end client doesn't even need to know about it. All you need to know is in an enterprise agreement, you must buy unified support to get some sort of support through a CSP channel. You don't. It's provided by, it must be provided by your CSP part. Right. Yeah, so the support experience I have is much better than with Microsoft Direct or on premises. It's complicated. We'll probably have a video. I don't want to run a training about support, but we can have a separate video. It's in, so there's a commercial training on SAMexpert Academy where it's already included in the module where we talk about CSP, all those things. But we'll release a video on this channel anyway. So cost management tools, cost management and cost reduction tools that Microsoft provides you, and we're not talking about online tools or anything like this. However, there's always like a pricing calculator, and maybe, I don't know, Stefan, if you want to demonstrate any other tools today, but going back to the previous slide. You have this pricing calculator, and you have, your Azure management portal where you can assess, you can download the data. So by all means, use it. If you're not using it, how are you managing your costs? So in regards to tools, again, there are some positive updates from Microsoft. I wouldn't call Mavere as a cost management tool. However, it may be pitched as like an Azure cost management tool. I'm not sure. I'm not convinced. Stefan, you may have a different option. And you need a financial analyst to analyze those nitty-gritty reports, unless, again, you have a third-party tool that makes it simple. I give the mic back to you because you're the specialist, and I'm just a listener on this slide.
Thank you. So I have basically a mixed view about third-party tools. I've been around and Microsoft acquired Cloudin, and it was the great thing. By now, Cloudin has utterly disappeared, and the thing is basically called cost management. And it went as far as that basically the functionality as well as the user interface was completely replaced. Something at the time, I spent a lot of time yelling at my account executive that I absolutely hated this tool. It hasn't gone any better for my personal taste. What I see is, and I mean, these tools, they serve a purpose. They give you one place to look at your cloud consumption, covering more than one cloud, usually. This is one of the key value offerings, that you have Azure consumption, AWS consumption, Google consumption, Alibaba, maybe on-prem, and it all goes into one dashboard so that you can see what you're spending, category, compute, storage, whatnot. If you need that, these tools are cool, but then you need to ask yourself the question, are you willing to pay a small but a percentage of your total consumption as a service fee for these tools? Because this is what most of them charge. 2% total consumption, 3%, 4%. Take a 20 million cloud spend every year, and you are basically paying them 600,000 to be able to look at numbers in one pane of glass. That pays for a few people. And the tool by itself doesn't usually help you make any cost optimizations, implement any savings. It may recommend things to you, but in the end, you still need to implement all of these. And now, as a geek really going very, very deep into this topic, I had the pleasure of being in an RFP where some of these vendors presented their tools, and out of 80 use cases I had up for them, they said for 60 that they had an API which gave me the data. My reply was, yeah, so does the cloud. But your mileage may vary. I'm not a fan, as you can see, but they are established. And if they help you, by all means, if they are bringing in their value at least a few times over, by all means, go for it. But don't just get fancy on one of these tools if you are not going to use it extensively. Then better stick with the cloud native stuff.
Thank
Stefan's
you.
opinion, not a fact, Stefan's opinion, but I would say an informed one.
So Azure pricing calculator, it may look a bit differently these days, but it does exist. And I use it. I use it sometimes to estimate how much is going to be saved on a certain machine with Azure Hybrid Beef, for example, or with reserved instances. Did they introduce savings plans into the Azure pricing calculator already?
Yes, and this is what I would like to show later.
Maybe you can show it now, Stefan. Okay. I don't know if you can. Can you try and share your screen?
Absolutely.
Because we haven't tested it.
So
Okay,
does it
so
work?
I'll switch off my screen and I'll switch on yours. Shoot.
Okay. So this is the pricing calculator, which, by the way, if it comes up in a different language, if you replace this section of the URL with en-us, you get it into English again. It's sometimes interesting. Myself, I'm a native German speaker, and then the storage account turns up as a German translation, and I scratch my head and go like, what the heck is this? Because, well, I'm not exactly used to IT terminology being translated into the native language. Over here, you see categories which contain all the first-party services which Microsoft is providing. You won't find a FortiGate appliance or a Barracuda firewall or something else in there, but you will find everything in here which you can get right off from Microsoft. Initially, you have an empty estimate, and in order to actually see something, you need to click one of these dials, and we are going to have a look at virtual machines because we want to check out this new feature called savings plan. It's going to take a little while, and then this is added. You can either click on the view link here to get down to your estimate, which now reads virtual machines, or you can just scroll down inside it. Some information. So let's have a look at the features which you can get over here. Picking a random virtual machine. The one which Microsoft is always showing, at least for me, is a D2 version 3. This is a 7-year-old's virtual machine. I highly advise using the most current version, which is a V5. And it is giving you the pay-as-you-go price, which is $152 with Windows license included, if the machine is running 730 hours a month. So the first feature, which Sasha explained earlier, if you reduce these hours to like 7 hours a month, you get the virtual machine together with the Windows license virtually free of charge. Now, if the system is running 24/7, a production workload, an SAP system, any other thing that you basically need to have running around the time, you get features in order to reduce the cost for these. They are either called savings plans. This is the newfangled toy of Microsoft, or they are called reserved instances, which have been around for at least 6 or 7 years. Yeah. And the rebates vary. Savings plans, it depends a bit on the region, and it depends on the version. V3 is pretty old, but if we are selecting something a little newer, and you can nowadays just type in here, and we take a version 5 and have a look at the percentage. Right now it's a 32% discount on 3 years. We select the latest version, the discount goes up quite a bit. The reserved instances discount stayed basically the same. So we are going to go into this a little deeper down the road, but basically what this means is you can have a check here in the pricing calculator what a specific configuration would cost for you in a normal pay-as-you-go rate. When you are making a 1 or 3 year commitment through this new feature called a savings plan, which you can buy in monthly installments or all up front. Let's see if there's any difference to the rebates. There would be on AWS. In Microsoft, they just divide the upfront payment by 36 for a 3 year savings plan. So there is no difference in cost. You can also see the charge for the virtual machine from a 1 or 3 year reservation, which is the number down here getting ever smaller. So if we compare this from $30 to $80, the difference is quite significant. The reservation, however, does not reduce the license charge, which is behind this if you're using this license included feature. And if I take now a rather extreme example, so we move from a D2 system with 2 CPUs to a D8 system with 8 CPUs. Keep this thing here in mind, the number is going to go up. So we are now at $268 a month for the Windows Server license for this specific VM alone. My experience with EA customer pricing sheets is that you're paying at most this amount per year. Usually you're paying less per year for 8 cores. And this is why we initially said, have a consideration of this Azure Hybrid Use benefit, this bring your own license feature. It is about unique to the Azure cloud. In a very, very limited way can you bring your licenses also to non-Azure clouds like AWS and Google. But basically this is where Microsoft enjoys a home turf advantage because they provide both the platform as well as the intellectual property and the licenses. And with that said, I would hand back to your screen, Sasha, unless there are any questions which right now sharing I cannot see.
Do you want to talk about the kind of tips and tricks in this calculator, some particular things that people should pay attention to? For example, interestingly, if you procure less powerful virtual machines, for example, 2-core machine, Windows Server licenses start from 2 cores, and in that case, Azure hardware benefit is not beneficial at all.
It still is. It's just not as cruelly beneficial as it was with the 8-core machine, but it's still cheaper.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, but my comparison didn't show that. But we can look at the numbers again. But SQL Server has a minimum of 4 cores. Why did they not apply the 8-core limit to Windows Server virtual machines? Eludes me, but maybe because they can. That's another hidden advantage of Azure compared to other cloud platforms where it works a bit differently. Differently. I'm not saying maybe more expensive or not, but there we go. Anyway, going back to my screen, and and let's do it like this. So okay, Azure pricing calculator. So one thing when you learn to manage costs in Azure, what you need to understand is that Azure is it's a hierarchy of things. But the problem is also when you have an enterprise agreement, you have your enterprise agreement tenant. You can have multiple tenants, but normally you would have one tenant. That's the ideal configuration. But if somebody goes, like an enthusiast employee, goes and buys a subscription themselves, they get a different tenant. And like Stefan just said, even under the company name, they get a different tenant sometimes if it's not done properly through the enterprise agreement, through the login of the enterprise agreement, authorized person. Developers create their own subscriptions, and that's fine. Through Visual Studio, well, that's fine. I'm saying that's fine, but then how do you manage costs of that? So visibility, you may not get easy visibility of those tenants and subtenants and developer subscriptions, but if you want to manage your entire cost, if you want to run it under your FinOps kind of umbrella of processes, you must somehow learn about them. You must somehow understand. Yes, it's shadow IT. Yes, people get too enthusiastic, and your role is to deal with that. Curb that enthusiasm. Work with these people before they buy anything. They would have to go through a process of approval, for example. In regards to cost management, in particular here, so most of the customers know that. Some still don't. Is if you need to do something for test and development, the developer subscriptions are the way to go, because you get all the Microsoft software for free. And as far as I remember, something around 20% discount on compute and storage and other services. Is that correct, Stefan?
It depends very much on the service, but you can usually, so what you at least get is the Windows Server products completely free of charge, and then a subset of the services of Azure you may get extra rates on, and reservation may yield even higher rebates than they do on the enterprise pay-as-you-go rates.
So for development, obviously, yes, review. And by the way, Azure is the only cloud where you may bring your Visual Studio licenses into. All the other clouds, authorized providers or listed providers, it doesn't really matter. Neither in SPLA nor in AWS. AWS is SPLA. Google is SPLA. So in SPLA, there's no bring your own license for MSDN. And I think even with Microsoft allowing to bring in subscriptions to a provider, right now the recommendation is do not do that, because there's no clarity around. Microsoft needs to provide this clarity. They need to release a guide saying explicitly, yes, you may. Until they do so, Azure is the only explicitly permitted platform to use your MSDN Visual Studio subscription licenses. So MSDN is an old name. The new name is software that comes with Visual Studio subscriptions, but there you go. Okay, moving on. So you need to get access to the portal. if you want to manage costs. And normally you get it directly, unless you procure Azure through a CSP. Because when you procure Azure through a CSP, the partner, becomes the admin of your tenant, of your subscriptions, and you have to ask them politely to grant you access. They probably will if you ask, but if you don't, they won't give you access. So obviously, via CSP, it's not access to the. This is the same portal Azure.com, because the EA does the enterprise agreement portal is an additional portal. I think it's ea.azure.com if I'm correct.
Exactly. This functionality is now more and more absorbed into the portal.azure.com as well. The CSP portal is again reached through portal.azure.com, and Microsoft will behind the scenes figure out if you're an EA customer, a credit card customer, or a CSP customer. What you see is that some of the features which work in one don't work in the other, with credit card and EA usually having all the features and CSP sometimes lagging behind a little bit. And the reason behind that is that it's, even though it looks all the same, actually separate products which are built separately by Microsoft, as far as I can tell.
So after 1 hour, Stefan, we are coming to the most exciting part of how do we reduce our costs?
Yes.
Cost reduction tools, measures, features, and there you go. I'll let you talk through this.
Happy to. So the most important thing if you're running significant Windows workloads is to leverage the Azure hybrid benefit. Doesn't really apply if you are mostly a Linux shop which is looking into data analytics. If you're running free versions of Linux already, Azure hybrid benefit doesn't help. But for all, really, about all your Windows Server workloads, it is a huge boon to leverage this. Then the next thing that you can do, but this then needs a bit more insight, is to look into the different versions. When we had a look in the Azure pricing calculator before, we started with the version 3, and then I quickly moved to the version 5. And you may remember that the rebates were better on the savings plan. But one more thing, which is a difference between version 3 and version 5, is that the performance of the version 5 is much better than that of the version 3. So this means that you may be able to run an existing workload, which is idling or sitting on a version 3 today, on a smaller VM using version 5. A smaller VM costs less than the bigger one.
Can I say something? So just to explain, to clarify this to somebody watching who's maybe not yet accustomed to cloud terminology, versions. What Stefan means is generations of Azure virtual machines. So Microsoft released. They create new images, new features, different software in different data centers, and they improve them. So they are generations. Version 5 is a generation. So it's a newer machine. You probably will get the same performance with a smaller machine, and nevertheless, it still gets better rebates and cheaper prices. So it's not on this slide, but that's another cost reduction opportunity that you can use. And Stefan introduced me to it when we just started working together. I was actually quite surprised that, yes, you need to migrate. And probably it's not a lift and shift. It may be difficult, but if you have a hardware retention process in your on-premises infrastructure probably already. So it works almost the same. You are upgrading your hardware. So you're upgrading your virtual machines from a generation to a generation. Can you move images or disks from, Stefan, do you know that? Can I actually procure a new VM and then detach the disk from one VM, reattach it to a new VM, like in a few minutes? Is that possible?
It's even simpler. You can stop the existing VM, choose a new size, and boot it back up, and it will boot back up in a new size, all the disks remaining attached. But there's one caveat, and this is now really getting a little nitty-gritty. Old virtual machines always got a little temporary disk to put the page file or swap file onto, and it was usually 2 times the amount of RAM which the old machines had. And this was always baked into the virtual machine's price. With version 4, generation 4, Microsoft introduced 2 different families of virtual machines, with temporary disk, much bigger, and without. The one with a temporary disk, which is the only upgrade path you have from the older generations, which had a small one, is about 15% more expensive than the virtual machine without a temporary disk. It varies, it's between 10 and 20%, so good average being the 15. So this means if you are today creating a new virtual machine using an old series which has still a temporary disk attached to it, D version 3, E version 3, you're actually inheriting technology debt, even if you're going to the latest version to enjoy better performance at about the same cost, because you have to use a version which has a much bigger size temporary disk. But this is now really getting pretty out of hand. So now we are getting fancy when it comes to cost optimization and choosing the right things. But the reason why I'm saying this is if you today look into, for example, an Azure Migrate product, or even just you're firing up the Azure calculator, the first thing this tends to show you is still the version 3. The only answer to this is Microsoft seems to have bought a whole lot of hardware, which they've used to build a whole lot of version 3 systems.
Yes.
They should be showing version 5 to be fair, but it's still version 3 creeps in basically whenever you see a proposal for a D like Delta version 3 or a E like Echo version 3. Please challenge that. It should be a version 5 in 2023.
Yes.
Exactly. Carl, your comment, spot on. This is exactly why you're getting better performance.
So that's about right sizing, also oversized systems. But that is a nitty-gritty stuff.
Yeah,
Turning off unused stuff.
Okay.
That is so obvious. We already mentioned it twice, I think.
Exactly. Then interruptible workloads for spot VMs. Don't put your SAP system on a spot VM, please, because you get like 30 seconds eviction notice, and this is not enough to do a stop SAP, even though they are very, 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 very cheap. But what this works very well for is if you have, for example, a test workload, a batch workload, where you're scaling out a huge pool of machines, which can finish at different times and which can feed intermediate results back to a main orchestrator. So basically, if they can survive with being interrupted, while reserving a virtual machine, which is the last point, gives you a rebate between 30 and 60%, spot VMs give you somewhere between 85 and 95% rebates. So you basically get your virtual machines for a tenth or even less of the cost. And the last thing, and this is where actually most of the organizations can make significant savings, and very, very few do to the extent which is actually good, is Azure reservations and savings plan. I usually see some small forays going into these savings levers. My recommendation right here is you should try to move towards 100% coverage, that all your reservable workloads are either on an Azure reservation or on savings plan. Better to have one or two systems too many reserved. They have a 60% discount than paying a few too many systems in a pay-as-you-go rate. And what you can reserve is more than only virtual machines. The list is ever growing, but this is a pretty good representation. So basically it means whenever you are spending a few thousand, a few $10,000 on a specific meter category in your bill, have a look at the Azure reservations. Check if they are potentially something that you can reserve, because on average, as I said, you can knock about 50% off the price of the services. And it really, really makes a difference.
Just a quick note, as I took this picture from getlicensingradio.com and I credited it here, that's actually a great website. Microsoft is financing it. I think Licensing School is behind it. Probably, I mean, it's obvious. They have lots of little, like 15-minute exams there. Not 15, well, 15 minutes for me. But they're short exams, and you can get certified for free. But the most value is for all those exams, they provide you PDFs with compressed information, which is very good. And it's I would probably say it's almost 100% up to date, because they update it regularly, because Microsoft pays them to do so. So yeah, just I did my due diligence, paid back the respect to great initiative. I mean, still that's the only licensing initiative that Microsoft still supports officially. Savings plans, that's a new thing. Well, relatively, a few months, isn't it?
Yes, it came in October-ish of 2022. So it has been around on AWS already for several years, and Microsoft followed suit because with reservations, you always had to play this mini game because a reservation basically forced you to choose a deployment region, West Europe, East US, South India. You had to choose a certain instance size, DS version 3, ES version 4, all the different availabilities. And then in there, you had to choose a certain number of CPUs which you wanted to reserve. You made a change to any of these parameters, family or region, you actually had to move your reserved instance to a new reservation, making the exchange behind the scenes. Otherwise, you would end up paying for the reservation at a reduced rate, while paying for the systems actually running on a pay-as-you-go rate, which was a popular pastime in many companies and still is.
Okay.
So what
Yeah.
savings plan changed there is that you are lumping all the covered compute workloads together. And by the way, any reserved instances that you have in place, they come first, so they have priority. But anything which is not covered by a reserved instance is eligible for a savings plan. And there you, for example, define that your rebated spend will be $50 an hour or $100 an hour. And then pay-as-you-go services, which after applying the savings plan cover $50 or $100, will be under the savings plan rate. It's basically your own way of getting a rebate on a large fleet of services available in Azure. Not everything, but more than reserved instances cover, and get a 30 to 50% rebate depending on a 1 or 3 year savings plan term, with a few of the caveats which we quickly talked about when I showed you the example in the calculator earlier.
What I want to mention is, from the cost management perspective, how you need to interpret this in your mind. This is a commitment. So both reserved instances, which are attached to a specific size and specific region, and savings plans, they are commitments. So with Azure Hybrid Benefit, you assign license to the virtual machine. You tick a box. This virtual machine is using Azure Hybrid Benefit licenses. With reservations of any kind, you don't. You just, basically what you do is when you buy a reservation, you commit to a volume. And then Azure automatically, with its own kind of mind in the background, applies the discounts to your procured services. And it chooses, at least that's what they claim, so I don't have the evidence of that, maybe Stefan, you have. What they claim is Azure automatically picks the biggest discount from, if you have multiple, you can have multiple savings plans overlapping, you can have multiple reserved instances overlapping with savings plans, and Azure is supposed to pick the right one. So for example, if you procure, even with the old reserved instances, if you procure the virtual machine with, not even like this, let me put it the right way. You prepaid for 8 vCPUs for a certain size. How it works then, if you deploy then a virtual machine with 8 vCPUs, this is where the saving is applied. And then you, for example, delete it, but you have 2 more machines in the same family and size. I'm still talking about reserved instances. Azure sees that there's no more 8-core VMs, but there are 4 vCPU VMs. There are 2 vCPU VMs with 4 cores each. So it takes the discount that you prepaid, committed to, and applies it to, we have a slide for this, applies it to the virtual machine. Well, we'll get to that. And reserved instances work exactly the same. So you commit to a volume. What's important is with any commitment, Mac, savings plans, reserved instances, I would not be very optimistic, because if you do not use it, you lose it. As Stefan just said sarcastically, but I'll say openly, you don't use it, you lose it. If you go above, then you pay standard pay-as-you-go rates. So you must find the right balance, and usually you learn it. If you manage your costs really, if you analyze your previous experience with this, your previous periods and costs, you can kind of find that right watermark where maybe sometimes you're below it, but most of the time you're saving. But then again, with every commitment, This is how pricing works. This is so in all the sales books, when they talk about setting the right subscription price, people tend to buy a little bit more, thinking maybe I'll use it. What happens is you don't, and then you've given Microsoft basically charity money. So
yeah,
there you go.
the trigger here is if you buy too little, you are also giving Microsoft charity money through the pay-as-you-go rates, which are 2 up to 3 times the cost of the services running, which you could have reserved. So yeah. Indeed, getting it exactly right, especially if your IT utilization is moving up and down, is a very, very tricky endeavor. But getting it high enough that you are getting a good overall rate for your workloads in Azure, this is actually one of the key challenges which FinOps has been created to help you address, learn about, and solve.
Right. So Azure VM cost is basically consists of, when we're talking about virtual machines, because that's the core service that you'll buy from Azure. You'll buy a lot more. It never stops with just virtual machines. But there are two items that you pay for in the virtual machine. One is compute. The other one is Windows Server license. So we're not even talking about any additional software. Just basic Windows Server virtual machine. Obviously, when you buy a Linux machine, you only pay for compute and storage and then how it's built per minute, as we already said. Both of these things are built per minute, maybe per second, but yeah, let's agree on per minute. How do you reduce virtual machine costs? You use reserved instances or savings plans, and for Windows Server licenses, you use Azure Hybrid Benefit. That's the way to reduce costs. And in most cases, Windows Server Azure Hybrid Benefit provides a discount. And as Stefan said in the very beginning of this session, when if you weren't here, so he had a case when it was 1/22 of the price, so less than 5% of the pay-as-you-go price on the license was achieved through Azure Hybrid Benefit. And sometimes it can be zero when you have Windows Server data center license you already use on premise, and you can dual use them in Azure. So these are the ways. And what you see here is like rough overall.
It's what you get with rebates.
In my original culture, an average temperature in the hospital. You measure every single person in the hospital, and the average temperature is 37.1. It doesn't tell you the exact picture, but it gives you the idea that people there are probably not in good health. So these are average savings. If you're clever enough, you can achieve from using reserved instances. Savings plans are, at least at the moment, providing lesser discounts. But this should be your target. By using these tools to get to that level of discounts, this should be your cost management target. And as you can see, it is substantial. Mm-hmm. If I avoid expletives, which I really want to say, this is substantial. So, Stefan, you want to add anything here?
No, I just want to absolutely, fully, utmostly support what you just said. Looking at these two things alone is usually 70 to 80% of the savings which I can achieve.
Carl is asking, would it be recommended to switch from RI to savings plus for easier management? You have an answer to that, I know.
Yeah. Let's share it. I think yes, in general, but with a few caveats. It depends very much on the services which you are running. As I showed earlier in the calculator, if you, for example, still have workloads on a third generation virtual machine, the rebates are very low. If you are in a region where the cap on the savings plans rebates is lower, the regions don't all give the same rebate levels, then it may be beneficial to stick with a reservation, because a reservation could get you up to twice the rebate which you would get from a savings plan on the same resource. Nevertheless, if it is a significant effort, which again you need to cost for, to play the reservation minigame, constantly adjusting the reservations, the savings plans become really, really interesting. And this is not yet to talk about a change to reservations coming end of this year, where they lose the interchangeability. It's something that we don't have on the slides here, but basically the rules of reserved instances change on the 1st of January 2024. Purchases then become final. And latest at this point, I recommend savings plans for everything which you are not damn sure is going to be on exactly this configuration for the next 12 or 36 months. Because if you move off it, you will be stuck with paying a reservation and on top paying pay-as-you-go or savings plans.
Is Microsoft phasing out reserved instances? What's your opinion?
I think they will stay. They will coexist. What I would rather see, and this is now pure speculation on my side, we are basically getting to reserved instances on Azure, which look a whole lot like the standard non-convertible reserved instances on AWS look. Also, their purchases are final, but AWS gives you a way to resell them on a marketplace, like second-hand licenses. So you can sell off excess reserved capacity. And this has created companies who actually work as a broker. So they sell you reservation capacity as your load increases, and they buy back reserved capacity from you as your load decreases. So they're taking the financial risk out of running at a 100% reservation coverage rate. Of course, taking their fair slice of savings generated. What I do imagine is that we might see services like this coming to the Microsoft world as well. At least I would love that, because it takes the very messy mini game out of managing the whole thing. Then you can make the choice if you try to cover everything under a savings plan, or if you go with one of these providers and basically make it their problem to get your reservations right.
Interesting. I would like to see that. Fun stuff is that Microsoft is learning from AWS, and this is not the first occasion when they are learning from AWS. Well, AWS. Some people still say that AWS is the leader, and probably it is, but I don't think you can really compare them.
I would say it's like in a horse race, head on head. Sometimes the other has the nose in front, sometimes the other party. It depends a bit on the service you're looking around, but a few things tend to happen in AWS a few years before they come finally to Azure. So let's see. I'm very curious myself, to be honest. Would love that kind of service.
Let's move on. We have 15 more slides, and they become more and more interesting. So tell us about the reserved instances, please.
So a classic application for reserved instances, think about your ERP systems. You tend to design them once, you put them on hardware, which you have measured, which you have spec'd for the specific workloads, and then these systems basically remain. They are not getting changed, they are not getting resized, they are usually not getting modernized, but they simply remain running all the time. This is an absolute candidate for reserved instances. By the way, the really big systems, the M series, which tends to be used for these ERP systems, enjoys by far the highest rebates on both savings plans as well as on reserved instances. So there, by all means, go for discounts. If you need to make a choice between 1 and 3-year discounts, I always try to convince anyone I work with to go for 3-year discounts, because where the 1-year tends to knock off 40%, 3-year knocks off 60%. It pays itself after a really short amount of time comparing to the pay-as-you-go rates. If you cannot fit this into your budgeting process, okay, fair enough. But running these workloads with 3-year reservations behind, really, really interesting. And after you had a look at your long-term running systems, which hardly ever change, look at the systems which have been running already for a few months in a given configuration. You can still exchange reserved instances, at least until the end of the year. And any reserved instance you buy this year will have the product terms of 2023 allowing interchangeability. So my read is that even after Microsoft changes the rule, this only applies to newly bought reservations. So you would get one final conversion even after 2024 for ones that you're buying in 2023. So start buying them. Start convincing your budget owners that it's a good idea. Start talking with your finance organization that making these commitments, and they don't have to be all up front. You can pay for them on a month-by-month basis, are really, really worth it for your company. A lot less cost to produce your IT services if you leverage these. And as Sasha already said, you do not have to attach this to a single VM. As long as you remain in the instance series, you can have a VM with 2 CPUs, or one with 8, or one with 16. It doesn't matter.
This is the slide, by the way, that we already mentioned that you're talking about.
That's the one we talked about earlier. Exactly.
So
it really doesn't matter as long as you have the same. The way how I remember is the number in the VM can change, but all the letters, everyone, the capital letter in the beginning and all the small letters behind, they must stay the same. Then you're in the same family, or instance size family as Microsoft calls it. And if you have a commitment for 16 CPUs, or in this case for 8 CPUs, it doesn't matter if you run one VM consuming it, 2 VMs consuming it, or you have one bigger VM. The 8 CPUs you reserved will be discounted by Microsoft, and everything coming on top, you will be paying the pay-as-you-go rates for that. So
brilliant.
Again, use it.
Yeah. So you need to choose certain things when you buy it, and I think now it's better to see this in comparison with savings plans, where when you procure savings plans, you don't have to attach to yourself to a specific series, which I called type on this slide, specific series of virtual machines. Savings plans provide you more flexibility across various things. So there's no attachment to a specific series. And these are the current cancel and upgrade rules that will stop being stop working in 2024. Is that correct, Stefan?
Yes, 31st of December 2023 is the last day where newly bought reserved instances have these terms. As of the 1st of January 2024, any reserved instance purchase is final.
But can you reassign the scope? Because scope is easily reassigned. There's no cancellation. You just drop it to a different subscription.
Nope.
Will that stop working as well?
Sorry, scope possibly. I was confusing this with the region. So you may be able to still move the scope to something narrower. But honestly, my recommendation for scope is always apply it on the highest level, which you can argue with your internal charging organization. Because even if you are running under the reservations that you have in the subscriptions where you initially foresaw them, there may be a VM qualifying in another subscription, and it's for the good of the company that the reservation catches this VM. It may cause havoc for your internal showback and chargeback processes, and then maybe you need to narrow down the scope. But my recommendation is, unless there's a pressing reason, the scope should always be your tenant and not an individual subscription or individual resource.
And now this is versus the savings plans, right? So we have the savings plans.
Yeah, the key thing here is they give you flexibility. So it is a D version 3 today, it is a D version 5 tomorrow. And by the way, when I said the numbers can change, but all the letters have to remain, the version or generation, that must remain the same too for a reserved instance. So if you move from a D2 version 3 to a D2 version 5, it's a new reservation. Not so with the savings plan. With the savings
but not
plan,
in the savings plans, because savings plans are just across the board, yes, aren't they?
Exactly. They are not covering your network, they are not covering your storage, they are not covering plenty of other Azure services like a Bastion host or a firewall, but they will cover nearly all, if not all, of the vCPU-based workloads. They would even capture, for example, a SQL server in the latest generation, a platform service which you license by vCPUs. The compute cost would go down.
Is the full name actually Microsoft Azure Savings Plans for Compute?
Well, I see it mentioned the savings plans for compute, which to me indicates that there may be other plans coming in the future. And on AWS, you see also savings plans which have a different focus and a different scope. So let's see. It's definitely a moving field. Things definitely change. So let's see what Microsoft comes up with next. And
fewer things to choose, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. You basically only need to figure out how much will be discounted. And this is the important thing, not your current pay-as-you-go rate, but a discounted rate after applying the savings plan. How high is this going to be? And the Azure advisor will help you in that, or a good cloud financial advisor to get the numbers really straight. And then you can commit to this amount or stay slightly below, see what's happening on your next bill. And you can always buy an additional saving plan. You can just never return it or never exchange it for something else.
Here's a question. How does Mac work with savings plans?
Mac works with savings plan the same way it works with reserved instances. You have a pay-as-you-go rate where you usually get a full rebate. Take an example, you have a 20% rebate on your enterprise agreement. This means the pay-as-you-go resources are 20% cheaper. You do not get the same 20% on your reservations or on your committed capacity. It's usually like 4% or something like this. So you would get a 4% lower rate than the retail rate you see on the Azure pricing calculator for your reserved instances and for your savings plans alike. This is how I've seen it so far, but again, you may be able to negotiate something different for you.
So we have an interesting layering of, ideally what I see is if you're happy to commit and you're not overly optimistic, as I then again said, but not too pessimistic either. So you actually have to layer stuff on top of each other. So you have your reserved instances very targeted with a bit, maybe a bit higher discounts, but probably not anymore, but used to be in the beginning, than savings plans. Then you have savings plans which are wider and more flexible. But then you also can get your overages, and to avoid paying for those a lot for those overages, and maybe some seasonal workloads, any spikes in usage, you can use Mac for that.
Yes,
that's interesting.
Absolutely.
So that's what comprises the entire cost planning rather than cost management. Even it's more of a cost planning exercise, cost avoidance.
Yeah, it is modeling, and basically you are rewarded for driving with the pedal to the metal, because the higher your Mac, the higher your rebate tends to be. So if you are too cautious with the Mac and you end up consuming a whole lot more than what you committed to, you are leaving percentages in rebate on the table. And the same basically works with committing towards savings plans in reserved instances. If you're overly cautious, you're paying pay-as-you-go rates for resources you wouldn't have to. And this can add up to millions over the term of an enterprise agreement.
Or it could be vice versa. So again, I would also, as usual, exercise caution and overcommitting, because then you have to pay it to Microsoft and you can't reduce. You already committed to it, and if you're not meeting your targets, you're not getting your rebates.
Yeah.
You have to actually hit the target.
Corporate planning is extremely important. And I mean, what do you do if your core business collapses because COVID-25 comes around? Let's hope not. But this, I think, hit many companies pretty hard because it derailed income streams, business for a lot of companies. And if you then had commitments and reserved instances in place, you basically kept on paying for them. If you were on pay-as-you-go, you could scale down by the 60, 70, 80%, which your business may initially have been hit by, and you basically just reduced your cost. So yeah, it's tricky. So check with your enterprise architects. If the strategy is public cloud adoption all out, then you can reserve pedal to the metal. If the strategy is more like, nah, let's bring this thing back next year to on-prem, you should be cautious.
And here are the reassignment rules.
Yeah.
Cannot cancel, cannot upgrade.
Cannot is a very important term when it comes to savings plan, yeah. You do not have flexibility, besides reassigning scope, which again, you shouldn't. Unless you
I like the comment from Carl. Dear audience, they talk about Mac, M-A-C-C, not Mac computers, commitment for large organization. Yes, the Azure M-A-C-C commitment. It's an interesting beast. I think we'll do an additional live maybe with you, Daryl, and myself, just to talk about Mac. Not a long one, short one. You cannot combine EA with Mac. It's tough because they're different compensation models. Interesting. Yeah, maybe. I wouldn't. So let's talk about licenses. So we talked about reserved instances and reservations. Let's talk about Azure Hybrid Benefit quickly, because just as a reminder, we talk more about it in our specific Windows Server and SQL Server licensing training material. We did the SQL Server training. I think it was the two episodes of this season back, and the next one we published a poll today on this channel on SAMexpert TV and also on LinkedIn again, where you can vote for the subject of the April training. And when I published it in the first hour, Windows Server 2022 licensing was a clear winner. It was actually on today's session, it was also almost up until the end, it was the winner. And then Azure Cost Management overtook it. So, but then again, if you want to choose your topic, we give you 4. Go to our community page. So go to our channel homepage. There's a community tab. Go to the community, and there's a poll. The last post in the community tab is the poll for the April training. If you are our follower on LinkedIn, and we have about 5,000, more than 5,000 maybe followers there, there's a poll on our LinkedIn page, on the company page, and on my personal page. I reposted it, where you can also vote. What we do is that we combine the numbers together and see what topic is winning, because there's very little overlap, funny enough, between votes on YouTube and votes on LinkedIn, and we have communities at least in 2 places, and I'm a bit hesitant about running a third poll on the SAMexpert community because it's not that crowded yet. We only have a couple of hundred people joined the academy community, so let's let it grow. No, I don't do polls on TikTok. Stefan is asking me in a private chat, TikTok, ? No. Well, we have a TikTok channel, which is basically like I say, we have a TikTok channel. I talk there. If you want to follow, find Alexander Golev at SAMexpert TV on TikTok. There are sometimes videos where I just turn my phone on, and I used to publish pieces of these training materials. They didn't work. Now when I just talk, random thoughts, not random, about what we do, it gets more traction. And licensing news. I think Windows Server 2022 videos on TikTok are our most watched videos. Not millions, but like tens of thousands of views. Okay. Anyway, so if you're on TikTok, we're there. I'm old, but I'm still there. Moving on. So Windows Server Standard, Azure Hybrid Benefit. So here's I just can't keep repeating this. Sorry. I can't stop myself from keeping repeating this. That was the phrase. If you are paying for Windows Server or Core Infrastructure Suite data center for your on-premises infrastructure through an enterprise agreement, you buy it with software assurance. Why don't you use it in Azure? Because it has simultaneous use, 0 license cost in Azure. Use it. I'm talking about Azure Hybrid Benefit when applied to individual virtual machines. I'll give you the formulas in the Windows Server specific training. So Windows Server Standard, you have to choose. You have to choose where you want the license to be assigned, with one exception. When you migrate to Azure, once, it's a one-time opportunity. And it's only one way. When you migrate from on-premise to Azure, you have 180 days of simultaneous use. That is the only official dual use right, like this, migration dual use right, in the entire Microsoft licensing. I don't know if you know, but if you, for example, upgrade hardware on premises, Microsoft will probably let you do this. But strictly speaking, you're supposed to have licenses for the old hardware and the new hardware. There's no simultaneous use. There's no migration allowance. But there is when you migrate to Azure. You can reassign the licenses back if you want to, back to your own premises, but they have to stay with Azure for 90 days. That's the official rule. So we had a chat today with Stefan. He found an article on somebody's blog that says that the license must be attached to a virtual machine for 90 days. I promised to Stefan to find it out because I don't remember that. And I usually remember those things well, but I don't remember that being mentioned in the Microsoft product terms anywhere, that the license must stay assigned to an Azure virtual machine. I'll check. I promise I will. Mm-hmm. So Windows Server Data Center, Dual use is allowed between on-premises hosts and Azure virtual machines, but if you want to assign your Windows Server data center licenses to dedicated hosts, then it's just a typical license reassignment. Again, you have 180 days to migrate your host licenses to dedicated hosts in Azure. In that case, there's no dual use. But normally, when we talk about dual use, it's on-premises on the hardware, on the hosts, and at the same time, Azure virtual machines. How to calculate licenses? Here are the simple formulas without going very deep into the details. So you must assign a minimum of 16 cores to Azure. And the general rule is minimum of 8 cores assigned to a virtual machine. So there's a big question around the first rule, because what it says is you must assign at least 16 cores, which gives you a right to run 2 virtual machines. And it's not clear whether those 2 virtual machines could be like 4 cores and 12 cores. The way it's formulated on the Azure website makes you think, yes, you may. But the way the rules for a virtual machine are formulated in the product terms, I would be cautious with that, because the minimum per virtual machine at least after that is 8 cores per virtual machine. That's it. If you have a bigger virtual machine, you must increment the license by 8 cores. And obviously, 16 core packs are divisible. And for those of you who are still on the fence and say, Alex, you tell us, but our resellers, our Microsoft representatives tell us that a 16-core pack is 1 license. That is bullshit. And why? Where you can find the, you don't have to listen to me. Microsoft listened to us, and they included that in the frequently asked questions on the Windows Server licensing guide for Windows Server 2022. So it's now official from Microsoft. Stefan, I leave you with this slide. I need to go and open the door. I'm sorry, something is happening there. Live show, things happen.
Exactly, happy to do. So, we initially timed for like 60 minutes. I guess Sasha communicated that, and now we are nearly at 100 minutes. So thanks to everyone who is still sticking around with us. Hope it's interesting. So this is a summary of how you can turn on and how you can apply VM cost reductions for savings plans and for reserved instances. The way how you can leverage this is you need to order this. If you are running on an enterprise agreement or on a credit card, you can do this yourself in the Azure portal. If you are on a CSP subscription, you usually have to trigger the order through your CSP, but you can also request them to allow you to manage this yourself. Very often, they will want to manage this on your behalf. The Azure Hybrid Benefit is a checkbox switch or a parameter in your favorite infrastructure as code solution, which you can switch on anytime you create a VM or also anytime later. The way how this works with regard to a specific virtual machine is the Azure Hybrid Benefit is indeed a property of a given VM with a given host name. The reserved instances and savings plans, they basically just look for a number of virtual CPUs or a number of dollars in the case of the savings plans in compute, which you have paid for upfront. And if this qualifies, this is like the free entry to a festival. If they don't qualify, then they have to buy a ticket, aka the pay-as-you-go rate.
And we've come to the end of this training session, which has overrun. Apologies, but you know what? I don't think we have anything to apologize for, because we're giving away the value as usual. And thank you, Stefan, very much. I remind you, this is an example of what we did for this January training. Again, we have 2 polls. There are links on this slide, but basically it's very easy to find, our company on LinkedIn. You can search for it, SAMexpert, or go to this channel's community tab. There are polls for the April now training. Please choose the subject that you want. If your subject isn't there, then please let us know in the comments. Simple as that. Don't be shy. Don't hesitate. I want to learn about Dynamics. please let us know, because we're not even considering Dynamics. But if we get enough feedback, we can put it to a poll, and if people choose Dynamics, we'll do a session on Dynamics. So yeah, and on that note, there's an interesting off topic from Carl again. Carl is the only active today. Yeah, I heard you dislike it when we all come over to the high social media. You know what? I like it. I like TikTok. I watch TikTok a lot, and I want to figure out how to be present on TikTok properly. And if somebody told me like, but are you going to start dancing and like singing and doing all the trends? Yeah, I don't care. Since I crossed my 50 years old, I stopped caring about people's opinions. Your life becomes so much calmer. You just do whatever you want. And if somebody says, ignore them. That's what I do. Trust me, it gives you so much peace of mind when here it's quiet. Completely quiet. Almost. I still look at the numbers of subscribers on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. And by the way, please subscribe. I mean, if you like this material, if you don't like it, don't subscribe. We don't need that's all subscribers. But we deliver value every week here, either in the form of a short video or a long video, or a live show, or a training like this, or an update on Microsoft licensing. And by the way, today's updates are boring. There's almost nothing. There are some bits. I'll probably figure out what to say in a week's time. On the 8th, we're going to have a licensing update next week, same time, 3 o'clock London time, 4 o'clock in Europe. I think it's 8 on the Pacific coast. So yeah, it's 10. So yeah, thanks very much for those who are with us. Thank you for watching the recording. If you're watching the recording, please click like if you like it. And this is what we're here for. Stefan, thanks very much from you. I think it was a really good session. We can do this again. And I'm even thinking right now, maybe we should introduce, because we have 4 recurring topics on the channel, we should bring in the cloud topic. Just have regular monthly sessions with Stefan Denk and me hosting it, just talking about various cloud topics. So, but we'll take it offline.
Maybe we can do BYOC, bring your own question.
We have this. All of our shows are Q&A. I like that acronym. We can try and market it.
No, it should be BYOQ. Sorry, I'm tired. It's not BYOC. It's like rata, 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 rata. Oh, no.
It's like BYOD, bring your own device. I remember a very high positioned lady in Microsoft calling it "bring your own disaster." On that fantastic and hopefully humorous note, thank you very much, everybody, again. And please come to our next Wednesday live. You can see all the next scheduled shows on the channel's homepage. And we have a few. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.